I'm Matthew McCabe. Welcome to Miracle Voices. Each episode, we will be delving into stories of forgiveness, healing, and transformation that have come about from integrating the principles of the book A Course in Miracles. If you want to learn more about A Course in Miracles, visit www.acim.org. If you'd like to visit the Miracle Voices site, please go to www.miraclevoices.org. If you feel inspired to make a love offering, please visit us at miraclevoices.org/donate. All donations go to support the work of the Foundation for Inner Peace, the publisher of A Course in Miracles. Now here's your program. Hello, everybody. This is Matthew McCabe. Welcome back to another edition of Miracle Voices. I am here with my co-host, Tam Morgan. Tam, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, especially now that I'm here.
Good. And our guest today, Samuel Rodriguez. Samuel, welcome to you.
And you?
Oh, I'm doing great.
Yay.
Ab fab.
Ab fab. Oh,
you haven't heard that in a while, have you?
I really haven't. It might be an opportunity for forgiveness.
There's a reason it hasn't been heard.
Exactly. It's funny.
Well, Samuel, how are you doing today?
Well, I hate to piggyback off of Ab Fab, but I too am Ab Fab. Today is my birthday.
Oh, happy birthday!
We didn't know that.
Yes,
that's wonderful.
It's another year around the sun, as they say. And I did love that show in the 90s, Ab Fab, if you guys remember the British show.
Yes, that's the hilarious show.
Very funny, so appropriate.
And you are joining us from the tip of the North Pole. Is that right, Samuel?
Well, right now, that's basically what it resembles. Lots of snow and quite low wind chills. But as I'm in Canada, that's to be expected. So I can't really complain all that too much.
No. Right?
Yes. Well, this will warm you up.
That's right.
Oh, yes.
At least our hearts.
Well, Samuel, let's jump right in. How did A Course in Miracles come into your life?
So it came in kind of a roundabout way, I'd say. To start off with, I guess I've always been pretty interested in, well, I was brought up in the United Methodist Church, so a traditional Christian household. But spirituality was always something I was, interested in beyond that. Once I was in my early 20s, I'd probably say around 21. It was one of those years where it seemed everything went wrong. I went through a very terrible breakup, lots of family chaos and things like that. So it was one of those points where you kind of, as they say in the South, come to Jesus moments. And so I was kind of really forced to look at what I had been valuing and what I had been brought up on was doing for me in my experience. So that kind of brought me into just looking on the internet and in bookstores for just sources that I thought would kind of feed that appetite for knowledge. And I came across Return to Love by Marianne Williamson, obviously. So that kind of introduced me to obviously very basic, a cursory introduction. I moved on from Return to Love and then came across Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle, who I believe quotes the Course, if not directly, but is obviously influenced by the Course's teachings. And so that was way back then. Fast forward into 2019, I had yet another come to Jesus moment. But this time, instead of going to kind of outside sources for the Course's material, I finally dove into the Course itself, reading through the text and the workbook somewhat simultaneously. And it was then where I realized I had finally, after looking basically my whole life, I had finally found a path that I thought really spoke to me on every level. So that's kind of how I got to today.
Yeah, when you say it spoke to you on every level, was there something that kind of jumped out at you like, hey, this is really speaking to me in a deeper way than maybe other texts I've read?
Certainly, it's funny. It was the intellectual level that it began at. Obviously, the course isn't everyone's path. And I think one of the things that I'm sure some people kind of run into with the course is the complexity of the not only the concepts but the language itself. Me being an avid reader, me being somebody who is always super intellectual, I felt like this was like it was finally something that I thought my brain was excited to be challenged by. It was a challenge at one. I felt at one part, but on the other, it spoke as if I had myself thought all of these words in this sequence before, and this was like a remembrance sort of thing. So it was one of those moments where it was just this mixture of almost ecstasy, on an intellectual, again, just the way it was presented, and then spiritually, I felt a lot of questions that I had, and a lot of the holes that I had found in traditional Christian texts and even other religious texts that I had read, were I saw a bridge to fill them at this point, with what the course presented. So I think that's what really grabbed me initially.
So, Samuel, you've said what brought you to the course. I'm interested in what kept you with the course, why you've stayed.
That is a wonderful question. You know, it's funny because so many times I think when we as human beings are trying to find our path, whether we know it's a spiritual path, I mean, it always ends up there, but it's almost like for me initially it was this like acquisition of knowledge. It was almost this intellect became an idol for me. So I was kind of like approaching all of these different paths, trying to figure out which one was the best and which one spoke to me the most. But when I got to the course, it was so all encompassing, and it was so what's the word? Well, in Hindu in metaphysics, you have Advaita Vedanta, which I forgot what it means in English. But it's the coming of one. It's kind of like not monotheistic. There's a word I'm looking for, where there's not a non-dual. It's a non-dual reality. That's where I'm trying to say. It was non-dual, so there was no way for me to kind of logic my way out of it, to talk my way out of it. It was a complete beginning and an end. So once I found it, in my heart and in my mind, I've never left it. Obviously, some days I'm more conscious of it living in me than others, but at this point, I would say it's just kind of part of my day to day.
And in this day to day, because I'm very touched by, I guess, the clarity in which you represent. You came in through the intellect, and the course. I keep calling the course, very in a certain way. This is dualistic. I'm thinking, even in my description of it, but it's like this most incredible masculine wrapping paper, and there's all of these words that come, with male terminologies in it, but its spirit is so feminine. And the core of it, as you unwrap it, you get from the intellect also to the heart as you apply it in particular. And so you've had this wonderful kind of love fest through your intellect, but how has it touched you? And do you apply it? Or, are you deep in applying the principles? Does it open you into your heart more than your intellect? Or is it a balance between the two? Or where are you now with that?
So I would say just at a base level, I'm always intellectual. So on one level, it is kind of a balancing act of both. But this is not to say that, of course, I'm transfixed by the intellectual level of it. I mean, like you said, and I find it so appropriate, the feminine heart of once you get to the relationship between us and Jesus, and the relationship between the Christ in us and the Christ in each other, it really, well, it dissolves boundaries. I mean, that's the point. I mean, how much more vulnerable can you get than letting all of these things that you once held against people, letting that go? So for me, it's changed the way I've not only, lived with the people directly in my life, like my family members and friends, but just, waking up, my prayers in the morning, I think about now, okay, who am I going to drive on the road with? Who am I going to see when I get my coffee? And I go through all of these things now on a much deeper level. It's than just waking up and praying, oh, good morning, Jesus. I hope I have a great day and bless me and my family. I find myself just going deeper into a more all-encompassing, and again, a more non-dualistic view of myself and the world, in my perception.
That's beautiful. I love how spirit uses whichever pathway sparks our interest, and then brings us all kind of to the same place within it, but through our different aspects. And I just wanted to share that my mother, who helped co-found the Foundation for Inner Peace and brought the course, published it for the world, she was an incredible intellectual. She didn't consider herself that way, but she really was. Her pursuit of knowledge was just unending, and her thirst for it. And at the very end of her life, and I mean on her last day, it was an extraordinary moment, because we were talking about course principles, and she was literally on her deathbed. And I said to her, she said, the story was that she was going to go meet her husband and mother. And I said, so you're going to go do that? She said, no, I don't know anymore. I don't know anything. And I said, is that uncomfortable? And she said, no, not at all. It's what I'm becoming. I'm melting into the experience of that which I practiced all my life. And basically, I said, and what about the course? And she said, that too. All of the words started to dissolve. So as she fell back asleep, and she would fall back asleep and wake up again, I read to her the passage of the course of, now forget these words, forget this course, and walk wholly unto God. I'm paraphrasing a little, but it kept her intellectually interested for all those years, because it kept awakening that part of herself. And the deeper she would get, the deeper it would bring her in.
Yes. And I totally identify with that, in the sense that, I can go back, and I'm sure we all know this, we can go back and read a passage, and, maybe before it didn't say anything, but today it says everything, and so it's transformative in that, it's so layered and complex, but again, so consistent and clear in the message that, it keeps you hooked, on that level.
Yeah. And now we get, sorry, Matt, go ahead. I was just going to say, now we get to hear how you get to practice it with forgiveness.
Yes, Samuel would love to hear your forgiveness story.
Yes, so this one is a deep one for me. Like I said earlier, I grew up in the United Methodist Church, and which, by and large, is a pretty, I would say, accepting, more or less, tolerant, I guess I should say, than say even other denominations. But as I was growing up, it was becoming apparent in who I was, which was, somebody of color, and then somebody who eventually would come out as gay, as someone that was kind of ostracized in the church, and not institutionally, but there was this concept of, and we've met this, I'm sure, with many other things, but of the us versus them, that the sinners, and here we get into the concept of sin and forgiveness. And when I was in the church, they would talk about how wrong homosexuality was, and this and that, but that, and they would always end it with, but Jesus forgives you. Or we forgive each other, and all of this. But for me, it left me so, I felt like an abandoned child. I felt like this idea, this vision of who I thought Christ was, and even who God was not the person who I thought they were. And so, going into my teens, and of course experiencing more of that kind of discrimination, it completely turned me off to the place where initially I had felt so at home. Because even though, I was brought up in the church, I had always felt, a particular draw to it. So my distancing myself from it was really difficult. So for many years, I became anti-church. I mean, I didn't deny God or anything like that, but I was anti the established church, I guess, as we know it. And that became a huge sticking point for me, because I still in my heart believed the things that they purported to believe, but there was this huge disconnect between what they were saying and what they were doing. And so that was kind of a beginning of a huge, I guess, sore spot in my life.
And Bill Thetford was gay too, and talks about that in what book is that, from Carol Howe? Never Forget to Laugh.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And was Bill's story of any help to you when you're kind of getting into the course more?
Yes, for sure. I mean, that was probably in the beginning, one of the big draws, because again, as a gay man, there is no place for you in the church, in the United Methodist Church. I mean, maybe there is now. I haven't looked into what their specific rules and regulations are. But there wasn't a place for that. So to discover the course, and I was already very much reading it and trying to practice it. And then when I started to read about the people, behind it, Helen and Bill and the others, Judy and Ken, Bill's story, of course, hit home. So I in my head, I thought, well, these specific problems that I'm having with spirituality and myself and God, I know Bill had to have gone through, and probably on some levels even more so. Obviously he came from a world where it wasn't even okay to be visible in most ways that way. So that Bill's connection, Bill's personal journey, and then, from what I understand, the way he was able to find peace and live a peaceful life, despite of everything. It gave me hope, and it gave me a great amount of hope.
So now you have these forgiveness tools, hearing about Bill Thetford too, and his forgiveness progress and dedication. How do you use those tools of forgiveness to kind of integrate these traditional Christian conservative values and forgive those?
Well, I think, it's really important to make the distinction between, what traditional Christians define as forgiveness versus the Course. And I think the most succinct way to do it is the line from the workbook. I think it goes something like, forgiveness does not pardon sins and make them real. Basically saying, it's not saying, okay, well, you did this, so I forgive you for it. It's that extra step of mercy and grace that it's not only not seeing it as being a problem, in your current reality, but not even being anything at all. And so when you kind of when I've integrated that more into what, the problems I have, you automatically have less psychic pain because you're not still holding on to these things anymore. Like, oh, I know she did this, but I'm going to forgive, but I won't forget, so you have this storehouse that, yes, on one level, you've quote unquote, let it go. But then on the deeper levels, it's just as dark and scary as it was the day it happened, whereas in the Course, it's constantly telling you, let it go and replace it with, true vision, and so when I'm good at it and when I'm concentrated in doing it, I mean, it's like night and day. It has to be, when you're attempting to walk on any spiritual path, I think, your experience has to be different, or what are you really doing?
Yeah.
Absolutely. One of the lines that I love from the Course, it says, "Those who are forgiven from the view their sins are real are pitifully mocked and twice condemned, first by themselves for what they think they did, and once again by those who pardon them."
Yep.
And when you turn that all upside down and inside out, to realize that none of it is what's going on at source, it gives such an opportunity for letting go of all the judgment here.
Yes, absolutely. I think, part of my frustration with the church was, again, it brought me to a point of, okay, forgive them. And now I feel like with the Course, it's like, forgive them and never happened. And then, like it says in the Course, and God takes the final step, so once we've truly let it go and realize there was actually nothing to let go because it never happened, that's when I think we start to realize, what true communion is.
Samuel, that's beautiful. Go ahead, Matt.
Samuel, you kind of mentioned briefly, like sometimes you forgive and things come back around again. You experience them again. They kind of boomerang back around. It's like, do you really want to forgive this, or do you want to go deeper into the pain? When that happens, how do you deal with that? Are you frustrated? Like, I thought I forgave this and here it is again, or what do you do? How do you handle that?
Well, I think, especially with me, I can't intellectualize things too much. So for me, I can't make my thoughts become this other monster I have to fight. So I do monitor my thoughts. But of course, like I said, when I'm off my game, and I start to go down this little rabbit hole, I don't I beat myself up about it. I just I recognize it. I look at it, and I said, okay, well, what's really going on here? Because I can't forget what it says, but what it says in the course precisely. But it's like, I think one of the lessons is we're not upset for the reason we think we are. And
Yes.
so I have to remember that, and then once I realize, okay, what did I just say? I just recognize I'm upset. So then it's like, okay, then something's gone wrong. What has gone wrong? And that goes to, what am I doing? What am I doing? And that's the problem a lot of the time in life, is we're doing too much. So I go to the course mantra, I need do nothing. And I try to get to the point where I'm not trying to control the situation. I'm not trying to dictate it. I'm really trying to, again, present it to God and let it go from there. So for me, a big help is remembering that most of the time, 99.9% of the time, we need do nothing.
Do you feel a shift then in certain relationships with the institution of the church and personal relationships from forgiveness then? How would you describe that?
Well, like I said earlier, what I initially thought there was to forgive was never really there. So in that sense, I've let it go. I don't really think about it anymore as I did. I'm not involved in a church, but the relationships. When I left in my early 20s, those relationships were kind of not really kind of come back. But it is interesting because I think with my parents, I had initially thought that my reading the course and integrating the course into my spiritual practice, I initially thought that was going to be a point of contention. But in that way, I feel like it's brought us together in the sense that even if they themselves are not, say, students, they can at least join with me on the level of heart of what it means to believe in a loving God, what it means to believe in the principles of forgiveness and peace. So that's been a shift that's happened, an unexpected shift that's happened from this whole journey.
And as you think about, since you started with the course and Marianne Williams's book and Eckhart Tolle's, if you could go back to when you very first started with all that, and like you could talk to your younger Samuel and be like, hey Samuel, what you really need to know is just chill out and do this. What would this be? I try to give you stumpers here, Samuel. I don't want to make it too easy.
Clearly. Thank you. You're keeping me on my toes. I would say that it's cliche. I have to go with a cliche, but it's true. You have to follow your heart, and I think part of, again, the conflict I had with the church, the conflict I had with my own concept of myself and my spirituality and what that meant for me, was because I wasn't really listening to my heart. And so what I mean by that is, when I was kind of troubled by these concepts of, a vengeful God and this glorification of the death of Christ, it was too heavy. It was too heavy. And so, I forgot where I was going with that.
Follow your heart.
Oh yeah, follow your heart. And so the whole time, my heart is like, this is not right. It just doesn't make sense. Why would God be vengeful? Why would God damn them and not others? Why are we concentrating on the death of Jesus Christ and not the principles and the life and the message more than anything? And so for a lot of the time I stifled that in my heart, and that was my 20s, traipsing around the material world and trying to stifle that. But eventually, when you have to face the lessons, the lessons that are presented to us, they keep coming back until obviously we address them. And this was one for me. So when it came up again, and I finally listened to my heart and kind of cleaved to the spirituality and the beliefs that I held to be true from the beginning, I was able to find my path once and for all.
Oh, that's beautiful. Well, we like to do something called the stop, drop, and roll in these episodes, Samuel. And what that is just we're looking for practical things you do when you get caught and just snared in the tar pit of ego, and it just feels real, and you don't want to let it go, and you're mad because, hey, they screwed you over and such, and they deserve this, and how dare they? All those things we do constantly. Is there anything you do, any kind of practice? Call a friend, go for a walk. I eat chocolate and scream in a pillow. I joke half-heartedly. But is there anything that you do?
Yes, I have a gratitude journal, which I started I would probably say about a year ago, if not 2 years at this point. It's something I get up. I put at least 2 things in the morning when I wake up, and then 2 things at night before I go to bed. And it's just a way to kind of keep me level-headed and keep my values in order. Because I think, again, a lot of the times when we get caught up with, stuff at work, stuff with our personal life, it's because we kind of we prioritize the things we shouldn't, and let go things by the wayside that should be at the forefront. So for me, my gratitude journal kind of keeps me balanced in that way.
Is it a paper journal or digital?
Paper journal.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. I like it old school.
Yeah. Yeah. There's something about that.
Yes. And the ink and the pen, it's more ritualistic. It's more of a practice that way, I feel.
Yeah. I mean, either way, some people, my son would look at me like I was crazy for that. Actually, he's an artist. I should not categorize him as that. He probably wouldn't, but I love that.
Yeah, it is amazing how that works. Like I do that begrudgingly, not every day, but sometimes I'll pull it out and I'm like, this is stupid. It's not going to work. And then by like number 5, I'm like on a, gliding down a rainbow of gratitude. So really understand what you're saying here. Well,
I will say, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I will say that next week is my birthday, and I think I'm going to get myself a gratitude journal.
Look at
I love that idea.
Yeah,
good for you.
Thank you for that,
Samuel. That's the butterfly effect. What you just did there, and I'm grateful for you doing it.
Oh, thank you. I'm happy that we're all together.
I love the idea too, even in the journal, of the pages fluttering in this butterfly effect.
Yes, it's a beautiful image.
Yeah.
Well, Tam, do you have any final thoughts or comments that you'd like to share with Samuel?
Just that keep on going. It's great what you're doing. And you brought such a smile to my face and my heart to bring just what we're talking about, that intellectual thirst to companioning with the heart, and where it does keep you moving, because your heart is opening more and more within the intellectual experience and the translation of it. And I come almost from the opposite, that my heart intuitively brings me to it, and I keep learning more and more intellectually. Oh, that's where that thought comes from. So thank you for sharing that. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to hit you with a non sequitur before we go here, Samuel. I know there's like specific Canadian foods, and I know you're American, but you're living in Canada, so you're our ambassador here. So in the East, in Montreal, there's poutine I had when I was up there, which is like a cheese curd on fries. Very unhealthy, but I love it. And is there any comfort food you've come to enjoy while you're in Canada?
Yes, and it's uniquely Canadian. It's called a beaver tail. And what it is it's basically like, well, it's like almost, well, it's fried dough. Let's just be honest. It's fried dough, and you can lather, peanut butter, Nutella, jam, whatever, and then they top it. And it's obviously in the shape of a little beaver tail. And they sell them even in the dead of winter. You will find those beaver tail carts with the lineups. And even in this cold and ice, hot beaver tail is a nice little comfort.
Oh, that sounds wonderful. I'm going to add that to my wish list for Canada. Well, Samuel, thanks so much for coming on the show today and sharing your miracle voice. It was really a pleasure to hear your forgiveness, and I'm sure it inspired many others besides Tam and I. So thanks so much for that. And I hope you warm up here for the rest of the year, and we'll look forward to chatting with you soon.
All right. Thank you so much for your time. It was a pleasure indeed.
Yeah, really loved it. And I am going to put that beaver tail first in my forgiveness and gratitude book.
Awesome. Can't wait to hear about the updates. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening today. Please subscribe to Miracle Voices by hitting the subscribe button on your podcast app. If you are enjoying these conversations, please consider leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever podcast app you use. And lastly, please visit us at miraclevoices.org and join our newsletter so we can stay connected. Until the next podcast, I want to leave you with my favorite course quote: "When you want only love, you will see nothing else."